So I'm really pleased to present this small talk for you and introduce you to the infrastructure that we are developing in Europe. It's called eLTER. It's not eLTER or whatever way of pronouncing
my
it.
apologies. My apologies.
No, you're not the only one. You're not the only one. So try to remember that it's eLTER. And distinguishing why we are so keen on emphasizing how it's pronounced is that there are several long-term ecosystem research networks that are part of the international eLTER network, and you might know some of the places in US, for example, that are in this network. So eLTER is the European global network, and we are at the moment very far advanced in developing in Europe the so-called S3 research infrastructure. That is a European invention of putting forward tools for researchers in a sustainable way. So when I presented this to the Finnish ecological forecasting people, they were saying that this might be interesting for your global community as well. So that's here I am now, and I made my title to talk about what is there for you. So I try to give some examples of how this research infrastructure can be used by the forecasting community. But of course, you are more than welcome to suggest anything you would like to see also and would like to hear me talking about. As was said, I'm at the University of Helsinki. I'm professor in forest sciences, and my special field is climate science. So I'm also a little bit introducing that part here. But first, let's try to understand what this eLTER is. It's a recognized European research infrastructure that is currently being developed, and the dark blue countries are the ones that are committed in becoming members in the long run. It's a long process. It takes some 10 years to create this European research infrastructure, and we are in the kind of midway of that journey. We have now the countries committed. We have also very, very strong scientific support from institutions, more than 160 different organizations in 28 countries across Europe. And as you can see, the right-hand side, we are very much focusing on trying to cover all the European gradients, including the climatic gradients, but also socio-ecological gradients, looking at the political situation and ecological boundaries and so on. So this is one of the biggest goals of eLTER in general, to cover the whole Europe and provide tools for scientists who are trying to do continental research. We are site-based network, so we are focusing on developing the services that the individual sites in Europe can provide to the continental scale network. We have a background of more than 500 sites in these countries, and we anticipate that not all of them will be in the end joining the research infrastructure. Maybe half of them will be partners, committed partners that are then, for example, providing standardized observations to the network and the data to the network. We have been searching or looking at the research challenges from the perspective of what makes an impactful science and what is needed for impactful science in ecological and socio-ecological disciplines. And of course, it's self-evident that biodiversity is one of the focus areas, climate change another one. But then there are also topics that are related, for example, on eutrophication, pollution, nitrogen deposition, ozone pollution. And then last but not least, in our focus areas is the socio-ecology. So how humans influence the environment and how we can manage our natural resources sustainably so that they are not deteriorating and they can be recovered maybe in the future. So that's the kind of challenges we are addressing. And of course, there are several local, regional, and global policies that are also addressing these issues. So we want to provide tools and advice for these policies. We are having a scientific concept behind the thinking, and you saw those four focus areas in the previous slide. What we want to do is put these together and look at them in different scales. And this is, we call it WHALES, or the whole system approach in short. So we want to focus on site scale and the press pulse dynamic model and scientific concepts related to that. How environment and society at the site scale behave and how they interact each other, geophysical and social and ecosystem services at the site scale. But then we want to go beyond that and use also the concepts from macrosystems ecology, which then are able to scale from local to macro scale and even global scale phenomena. And this is why we need a distributed continental network in order to be able to address this scaling issue as well. So this scientific theory is behind the concept and the structure and the design. And the design is such that it is eLTER is composed of hierarchy of site categories that have various levels of spatial complexity and instrumentation, but they all cover these different spheres, which you can see here in the colorful picture on the left. They start from the soil and geosphere, go through the hydrosphere, biosphere, social and economic sphere, and the atmosphere. So, and interactions between these different spheres are really important part of our work. So we will provide services that are related to the site, access to the sites, data from the sites, analytical tools and training for the site staff, but also we will be providing information clusters. And this means that we are not only dependent on the data that is collected at the sites themselves, which we call standard observations on site level, but we also gather multiple other data sources like remote sensing or modeling results that utilize the data that is coming from, for example, satellite observatories or model runs. And these all are available through our service center or virtual labs. So it's something that is, these services are accessible for everybody, and they are by definition free for use. So all scientific community can use them for free. One of our big maybe ambitions and also challenges is to how to make the natural sciences and social sciences meet, because our social ecology colleagues in the network and in the infrastructure are having very different vocabularies and very different ontologies, and we have a challenge how to understand each other. But this is a constant and iterative work. How do we translate the natural sciences work, culture and tools and ways of thinking to the societally relevant and policy relevant way of thinking, and how the policies can be taking these results up. And then again, going back to how the policy is again addressing new societal needs, and then reflecting how does the natural sciences cope with that, and how we are able to have this circle interlinked and and functioning. And one way of doing that is a decision-making theater. This is a very high-level concept of policy-making tools, but we plan to have also services towards these decision-making theaters, so that we try to translate our results in a language that can be used for policy uptake. For example, climate change conferences or biodiversity convention conferences or any other social challenges that are in our realm. How are we going to do that? This figure shows you two main strands of activities in the eLTER research infrastructure. The right-hand side is giving you an idea of what the national research infrastructures look like. So it's the sites themselves are located in definite places. And then there are platforms that are a bigger unit that cover larger areas and are spatially explicit living labs for testing social ecology theories, for example. So these are the components that are located in the different countries, the 26 or 28 countries in Europe that are participating. Then on the right-hand side, or left-hand side, sorry, is the centralized services to whoever uses these data or services that are provided by eLTER. And these services are grouped in several different thematic service areas. Very big part of the services will be dealing with data management and data integration and providing the access to the data. There will be something helping the sites and platforms put forward and implement the operations and make them also interoperable. Then there will be technology, innovation and development services, modeling tools, analysis tools, synthesis towards actionable knowledge, and centrally run analytics and observation for the sites and platforms. And all this is coordinated via the head office and service portal. So there is a single access point to all services for users. Although these thematic service areas are physically grouped into topic centers, and this is a normal way of governance of these research infrastructures in Europe. They are run by different countries, different organizations, but then they are having a centralized governance and centralized budgets, for example. So how does an eLTER site look like? And this is now a slide that is kind of schematically trying to illustrate what a site might look like. It is a boundary. There's a boundary of the site. It might be very heterogeneous. Sometimes it's in mountain areas where there's really much heterogeneity, or then it can be in areas where there's so much less heterogeneity. But what eLTER does is to provide data and knowledge about the inputs and outputs. So what happens, what comes in, what goes out, and then how this system is dealing with these inputs and outputs. What is changing in time, what is changing in space, and covering the system structure, but also functions in the scale of catchments mainly. And because we are a long-term ecosystem research infrastructure, very important part of our work is to collect the data in the long run. So we are focusing on decades-long time series. Many of our sites are actually having a history of more than 100 years. So there's a lot of data already existing, legacy data. And of course, it's a big challenge to get this harmonized and out, because a lot of data is not coordinated properly yet, but it's one of our goals to get this legacy data out so that it can be curated and then harvested for different purposes. I've already mentioned the standard observations, and this is a little bit now on what they are. We have been talking a lot about what needs to be observed at the site level so that it's valuable, it's relevant for forecasting and understanding the trends. At the same time, it has to be feasible. The methods have to be available, and it also has to be cost efficient because we cannot afford very expensive instrumentation, for example, in hundreds of different sites. So this is a balance which we have been trying to then meet. And we have a list of variables, a list of methods and protocols that then form the eLTER standard observations in the that are going to be implemented in those sites. So here is an example of how they look like. They are again focused on these different spheres. So there are several that are in geosphere and hydrosphere and biosphere and so on. And they are characterized by abiotic characteristics or biotic diversity or energy, water, and matter budgets. So kind of natural way of putting these structures and processes in a concept that can be then implemented at the site level. And what came out of this very large consultation was that we have now 65 variables or bundles of variables that will be then implemented at the sites, all the participating sites and platforms. Depending on the habitat, there's a bit different list of variables, of course. The terrestrial sites have different set than the, for example, the riverine sites or peatland sites. But the guiding selection principles have been that these methods and protocols need to have a high sensitivity to system changes. They indicate something that is relevant for our need for understanding the trends. They have to be able to support the comparisons between sites and even clustering of different types of sites so that they are interoperable between the sites. And they have to be relevant for modeling, which is, I think, very important for the forecasting community, that all these methods and protocols are something that the modeling community would be using and needing. And then this simplicity or parsimony, which is a principle that do it as simple as possible, but as complex as you need. So example of standard observations related to nitrogen at the sites. What will be measured in all these eLTER sites is atmospheric deposition, different components in the deposition, both wet and dry deposition. That's the atmosphere side. Then on the orange is the social and economic sphere, which is, for example, area under tillage and livestock and yield, because they are relevant for the nitrogen usage and nitrogen turnover at the sites. Nutrient concentration in running waters or standing waters. That's related to how eutrophication, for example, is taking place in relation to nitrogen. And then these kind of physical and chemical characteristics, nutrient concentrations, profiles in standing and groundwaters is also important, and soil water naturally as well. So this is an example how the standard observations work. And for all these different standard observations, there will be time series coming from more than 200 sites in Europe. So harmonized data sets. Now I have some examples that this approach has been used, although eLTER is not yet fully operational, but as I said, we already have some sites that are more than 100 years old. So there's a possibility to look at what the data looks like and how it can be used for example, modeling or scaling the processes. I have two examples. One is related to, or two actually are related to biodiversity monitoring and climate issues, and there's another set that is related to data integration and information clusters related to modeling as well. So the first one is on high resolution biodiversity and environmental time series, an example of Bavarian Forest National Park that is protected over 50 years already, and it's been forested and no logging has been taking place since more than 100 years. So it's mainly a pristine site, but of course, when it's in the middle of Europe, it's affected by air pollution like acidification, especially in the 80s, 70s, 80s. That was a huge problem in those areas. We, of course, cannot exclude climate warming. It's affecting all the ecosystems everywhere. So that's another trend that we can try to observe with the data. And the third one is bark beetle infestations that actually were very heavy and caused a lot of forest dieback in the mid-90s. And this consequently increased the nitrate concentrations in the streams, which were then seen, the effects were seen on stream invertebrate populations. So how can we disentangle the effects of these three different effects and trends on the ecosystems? Luckily, there was a site in the Bavarian forest that has collected the stream invertebrates already for 32 years. And there's also been abiotic data collected, the deposition, the acidification of the stream waters, climate warming, and then the bark beetles were also followed. So this site actually has then, out of these 5 spheres, 4 of them covered in this data set that was published. I'm showing you once more this publication. It's in Science of the Total Environment a couple of years ago. So the result of that is that these benthic invertebrates in the streams actually reflect quite the changes, but since changes are taking place simultaneously, it's difficult to disentangle what affects how. So this kind of high resolution in situ time series must be available in order to be able to follow what happens and then providing tools for a holistic approach. So what we see here, and this is now on y-axis a scheme of the population well-being or abundance. When they started seeing the decline of air pollutants, like this, and then at the same time the increase of pH towards neutral, this affected these bark beetles, which is here in the green, so that they started to increase. Then when there was these invertebrates are in this green. When there was this bark beetle infestation, then there was a lot of litter and dead material that caused nitrate to leach out from the system, and the streams became very rich in nitrates, which then stabilized this influence of the improved environmental conditions after the decline of air pollutants. And these invertebrates did not anymore increase in population size. And then when we add to the picture the temperature, the climate change increase, then we start seeing that with this increase in water temperature, this actually is now masking or the recovery and climate effects are kind of overlapping, and they are compensating each other, so that in fact there is a overall increase in abundance quite significantly, and also richness of species quite significantly. But without this kind of long time series and several different ways of looking at it, it would be really difficult to see what causes what effect. So there are papers out of this. Then another example is landscape management that is again in Germany. They have a series of sites that are called terrestrial environment observatories. And this is a study using the Terreno site that is close to, I think it's close to Leipzig, where there's different land use landscape managements. So in one part of the landscape, there is bigger patches and less fragmented landscape. And in some areas, there are much more fragmented and changed landscape. So how does this affect pollinators? And the result of that was that the species richness, which is linked to this landscape fragmentation, is actually affecting the way these species then react on the so if you have a semi-natural landscape, very small proportion, 2% only semi-natural, then the mean temperature affects very strongly to the species richness. It's declining with the mean temperature. When you go up with a share of the natural landscape, you actually end up in seeing less and less effect on climate to the population species richness. So this indicates that the more fragmented the area is, the more probable it is that the pollinator population is also affected by climate change. There is a linkage between these two. Of course, it's not a straightforward, it's not a linear linkage, but still it's existing, and this kind of data needs to be done properly harmonized in order to get this result analyzed. My third example is maybe more familiar to you, but less familiar to me because I'm not the modeler. But I took a couple of slides from the presentation of Christian Poppe and his colleagues from Jülich that are doing modeling, like reanalysis of data and modeling the land surface processes. And they had created this kind of time scale, how this evolution of land surface modeling has been developing. And then when these different kinds of model structures or components became mature enough to be used for forecasting and prognosis. Of course, the energy and water and carbon cycle have been developed in parallel, but anyway, that's how they wanted to put it. And the key caveat, of course, is that model input data covering entire systems is very scarce. So it might be that you have a data on hydrology, but not on carbon cycle, or you have data on biotic influences, but not on, for example, the deposition and so on. So it's difficult to disentangle this without a really good understanding of everything that is happening. So this would be the place in the center of this axis that would be needed in order to proper evaluate the processes and create a proper model out of that. So what they have done here, and it's a quite recent publication by Alexander Belflam et al. Last year, that created a map of Northern Europe and Northern Germany in particular, where they used the data from the sites that are providing soil water data, and then plant available water calculated from there, and then analyze that using models and predicting the drought severity of the drought based on plant available water. And of course, in Europe, we have had several very good years for that purpose, because we have had many very severe drought years. And they used also the atmospheric data climate models in order to get an understanding what causes these changes in these simulations. So I don't go much in detail in that because I don't really have a background explaining. You can look at the papers and get a better understanding on that. But I still wanted to give you a couple of slides about the data and eLTER ways of opening and giving the data out for users. So what we are doing and will be doing is that we will be advising and instructing the data providers at the sites with standard observations and the protocols and how to upload the data, how to make it through the portals available. And also, of course, the data providers might themselves want to use and see the data product. So this is something that we will be opening for the users, the ways of putting the data and also the data products. So there's going to be this service portal that I already mentioned, where the user can go and search for a researcher, search for a data or a site or several sites, for example, given certain habitats or certain standard observations, and then searching for the data from there. And this logo and acronym DIMES-STR is the dynamic site information system which we are running, and it's already running, and you can search from there all the sites that are available, and several of them already have quite a lot of nice data sets there. There will be visualization tools, analysis tools, data labs, how you can use the codes for analyzing the data, and libraries to analyze the data. And of course, there will be also lots of web applications. So a few slides on how they look like. This DIMES-STR is the dynamic information about eLTER sites. It has more than 500 sites. It has basic information on what the site is doing, where it's located, what are the boundaries, what is measured and how long, and which kind of data is available in either their own repositories or in, for example, the UDAT or some other European data repositories. Then there are these kind of visualization and tools for doing that. This is in planning, so it's not yet running. There are pilots and beta versions available, but this is not something we are at the moment very strongly advocating yet. And there is these vocabularies and ontologies which try to control the ontologies so that everybody knows what they are talking about when they are talking about temperature. It's been surprisingly difficult to define a temperature. When you talk about when are you measuring temperature, are you measuring air temperature or soil temperature, you get a lot of different answers, and that's probably a very common problem in many things. So the site register looks like this. You can search from there, for example, Alpine biogeographical region or different countries, sites. They are all listed there. You can have individual sites portrayed. You can have the contact information, which is also very important. You know who to contact if you want to know more about the site. And then you also have the boundaries, and maybe for many sites already some long-term data sets are existing. The API and various R scripts are available. For example, we have quite recently this year a tool for analyzing the costs for implementing the standard observations at the site. So there's quite a lot of tools already available and linked to the digital assets registry, which has then the information on, for example, publications and or other data products that are available there. And a couple of slides then about what is the coverage of these sites. If you want to do an analysis in the continental scale, you can see here that all the dots are the sites. And of course, very, very evident is that the Central European region, the alpine and subalpine region, is the most populated with these sites. And one reason for that is that many of these sites became existing when this acid rain program was running. So they are inherited from that area, that period. There are several sites in UK, actually many more than actually listed here, and in the Arctic as well. There are significant gaps in areas. One of the gaps is this Eastern European region, for example, Poland, Belarus, Ukraine. Obviously, we don't have sites in Ukraine. But if you would like to do an analysis where you have this black soil, very fertile areas in the Eastern Europe, that's where we don't have yet very many sites existing. But it's in doing, so we are currently negotiating with Poland and also Lithuania about that one. And then also the same situation in south here in Mediterranean. We have several sites in Italy and France, but very much less in Spain. And then importantly, we have the Eastern Mediterranean. We have both Cyprus and Crete here, and then Israel covered with quite well advanced network there. So there are a couple of papers out which describe the current coverage, current design, and analyze what are the gaps and how to fill these gaps. There are some information on the data labs. So there are tools, several libraries for accessing the codes and tools. This is in doing and planning, so I don't spend much time there because it might be that they are not yet available for public use, as well as these. So there's a lot of things currently planned and in doing, and in future, let's say that in 2 years' time, these all will be launched and up and running. And my last slide is an invitation to everybody. So if you are interested in what eLTER does and want to bring your science in the arena, we are organizing a science conference next year in June in Finland, in Tampere, which is in central Finland, quite easy to reach from anywhere in Europe. And you are most welcome to submit your abstract when the abstract submission will be opening in a few weeks' time. There's going to be excursions to several sites, social events, and scientific program with talks, posters, and workshops available for participants. And my last slide is this one. This is our slogan. We really believe in networking and collaboration, and we believe that wanting to go fast, then you need to go alone. But if you want to go far, then joining forces is the way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jaana. That was a really, really interesting talk. Thank you so much for agreeing to give it. Questions? Istem, yes.
Yeah, sorry. Maybe I can ask. Yeah, thank you for this talk, Jaana. I was wondering, so there are these standard variables that you're collecting from these eLTER sites, but I believe these are like need to be collected and shared retrospectively. But are you also thinking of a protocol towards like collecting these variables into the future as well? And if all sites will be keeping on collecting these data, and if there's a protocol, like how often they will be updated? What's the frequency? I would be wondering about that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And in fact, what we have now been doing is the thinking for the future. So we know that there are these sites that have been collecting, for example, biodiversity data with many different methods. And what we want to do in the future is to have at least the minimum set of variables collected with the same methods and with the same time interval and same temporal and spatial resolution, so they can be compared and they can be interoperable, so that if you go and search for a certain parameter, you would immediately or easily get access to 200 sites that have collected the same parameter. This, of course, is a challenge, and it's looking for the future. The second challenge is what to do with the old data, the legacy data. We don't want to interrupt the collection of the data that is done for decades. So that's a really big issue. And of course, it's a cost issue as well, because if you want to implement a standardized method and run the old non-standardized method in parallel, then you probably need to do double work for some time. But we want to encourage these old methods to be run in parallel for some time and then make a comparison, so we can actually calibrate the old method with a standardized method and then do some kind of estimate what is the reliability and possible use for the old legacy data, because they are very valuable and they are covering decades and decades, and it would be really shame to not use those data. But their quality and quality control is of course the issue. Yeah. But our standard observations will be quality controlled and they will be harmonized throughout these 200 sites.
Thank you, Jaana. Any more questions? So maybe while people are still thinking, I have one, because not me being in Spain, for instance, I see that there are quite some data gaps in central Spain, and you saw some of the sites that you had like high priority. So how do you decide on the high priority sites? Like, what does it make them high priority? And also, it has to, so these types of sites that you locate have to be then ultimately funded by the government, right? Long term. Or because you always say that you are negotiating with the countries. Yeah. Yes,
this one. The priority comes from the gaps. So these red dots here and in the Arctic are kind of pointing out that these are the real gaps where we don't have the proper coverage. And what we did if you want to look at these papers that are listed there, they are addressing the different kinds of ways of looking at the gradients. For example, the climatic gradients, the land use gradients, the demographic gradients. So this is a combination of all these gradients, and that's the kind of visual elements what we are seeing here, that these would be the priorities where we would need some more sites to be established. And exactly like you said, these sites are run by the organizations, universities or research organizations. So it's of course not up to us to build up a site. It's up to the Spanish universities in Madrid or wherever to decide that this is a need, and the scientific community really needs this site and these observations in these areas. And we only can inform the funding agencies and the organizations that it would be really much needed that these sites are existing and they are supported and they are sustainably funded. We don't have any funds ourselves to create or run these sites, but we can put a pressure from the scientific perspective that these would be needed. and
Okay.
yeah, it's a negotiation issue then, and of course it's not very easy one.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Owen, question.
Well, thank you very much for a really important talk. I learned so much. My mind is a little bit blown, actually. So many different questions. I've been looking at is it pronounced DIMES website and exploring a little bit now. What I understand is that is a database of the sites.
Yes.
And then in order to get to the data sets that are available from the sites, what I've seen is I get directed to the B2 Share portal, or at least in one case I got directed there. And then it looks like I need to download a zip file. So what I'm going to do, actually, it's not even a question, right? I think it's just amazing, right, that all of this is put together, because I'm really interested in kind of lake ecosystems across Europe and seeing what data is available for them. So I'm going to try searching this database. What I'm kind of interested in is data access policies across all of these sites that are on DIMES now. Is there standardization for that, or is it possible that one time I have to download a zip file, whereas another time there'll be an API to the data set, or do you know about that?
Yeah, that's a really, really important and crucial question, and I'm happy to say that this is in doing. We are creating a data policy that will be common and approved by all the sites that are belonging to the network. At the moment, it's very sporadic, and those who have uploaded the data to UDAT or B2Share or Zenodo, they have done it with their own way. So there's no one single place where you could find all the data. And we will not have a single data repository. That's not going to happen. But we are going to have a portal, the service portal, which directs the user to the right place so that they can download the data. Or if they cannot, if the data is not freely downloadable, then they can contact the site owner and ask for permission to use the data. This is different from, for example, what ICOS is doing, the Integrated Carbon Observation System, which has a central data repository, and they actually provide the data products, ready data products from their repository. So that's simple when you have in a way simple data set, a carbon flux. But when you have biodiversity, water fluxes, nitrogen, socioecology, it's very difficult to put everything in the same place. So we have been discussing this a lot, and our solution is that there will be single gateway to the data, but there will be no single place where all the data is sitting. And we understand that this is not always very user-friendly. It's going to be for the user, it's going to make some difficulties. But what we want to do is, of course, to provide the APIs and the services as good as possible so that it would be easy to use.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions? Don't be afraid to ask.
I have a question. This is a great presentation, really interesting. One of the things that we run into with the forecasting community is thinking about data latency. So like the carbon fluxes and taking atmospheric measurements, the data latency is very short for that. So then you can assess your models quickly. But we found that things like biodiversity, it takes time to get that data processed and then made available. And is that similar to what you see with the different measurements and protocols that you're thinking about for eLTER?
We are our standard observations and the protocols have kept this in mind, and what we would like to see, and I hope that it's going to be successful because the protocols are still in preparation, so I don't have them at hand right now. But what I hope that most of it will be automated, so there will be collection of data that will be then available from automated sources after some initial curation, of course, so that outliers and some such are taken away. But definitely there will be some parameters and methods that don't allow this kind of online and fast recovery. What we also want to do, and maybe this is also for interest in your case, is that we are using the centralized repositories, for example, from European Environment Agency or the ECA, ESA or NASA, so that we can have when you search for a site, you can actually have an information cluster that is having a lot of data that is not only the ones that is near the site, but it's also data that is harvested from third-party sources. So it's a collection of data that is then indicated so that it is identified to the site level, or even lower than site level in a geo-referenced way to put that data in. I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah.
Yeah, that was helpful. And I see Owen and Istam.
Exactly, yeah. Go Owen and Istam.
Thank you. I am right now at the moment trying to assemble a group of researchers in Europe interested in forecasting lake ecosystem dynamics, which really relies upon data and monitoring and data and science from sites. Is there someone that you could, I think it would be really, really useful to talk with people at eLTER and see what kind of synergies there could be. Is there someone you can recommend I contact, please?
There might be several. The one that has been in our scientific background team, and he's a stream ecologist, is Peter Haase from Senckenberg, Germany. We have several people who are in the integrated monitoring lakes network. If you want to send me an email with this question, I can come up with some emails in return.
Thank you very much.
Okay, all right.
Istam, go ahead.
Yeah, I just was curious about one practical question. So you mentioned these data labs where there are going to be like scripts, Jupyter books shared. Who prepares these? Can like third parties provide such things? Because as the Ecological Forecasting Initiative, we are thinking of creating some educational material, for example. If we are using some analysis for one particular eLTER site, can we create a Jupyter book, and would data labs host it? Is there a mechanism?
There is definitely a mechanism, and this is something that will be again developed in the next year or so, because we have now in Czech Republic a very active data creation partner. It's in Brno. The Muni, come on now, partner. So that development is ongoing, and I think that this kind of ideas have been already included, but it would be very nice to maybe give an example what you mean to them, so that they could be testing it and seeing how it could be beneficial for you and us both. So win-win situation. Definitely this is very, very good idea.
Okay. That's great. Thank you. So one opportunity for one last question. Okay, well, thank you so much, Jaana. It was really an amazing talk, really great initiative, and I hope, I wish you all the best luck that this is going to go smoothly, and we get some amazing data soon that we can use to forecast and collaborate, and this is really great.